Hello and welcome to the latest Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Poz, from the two-man power trip. Of course, joining me is the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. As we're recording this, basking in the glow of the long talked about Linda McMahon event at City College, crossing over my work and interest in following the story.
How did that go? Tell us all about Linda McMahon and the reflection of understanding Linda.
Yeah, it went very well. Interesting questions. It got a little bit technical on the education side. I think when I originally planned the event, the idea was like, what might Linda McMahon be thinking or do? And then suddenly, when she assumed the role of Secretary of Education, it was very clear what she's planning to do, sort of even calling it our last mission. So, there's a lot of debate on both sides and concern from some and so on. But something that I do want to share, sort of a little bit of throwback to TrumpMania, are some Linda McMahon facts that aren't often talked about or related elements that should be interesting. So if somebody is not interested in this, you could probably zoom ahead. I'll probably be done in 2.5, 3 minutes, but wanted to share it because I did the work. So get it out there in the world. So away we go. Linda McMahon attended East Carolina University and majored in French. The program was meant to prepare teachers for education. At points, Linda did state that her degree was in education, so that caused controversy. As we know, Trump paid a site fee for WrestleMania 4 and 5. Something that isn't often remembered is that this was booked at the same because of the success of WrestleMania 4, that there was 5. If it was a disaster, maybe there would have been a way of getting out of it. But paying a site fee, which is like a main part of TKO's business model today, it was really uncommon for wrestling outside of very small time elements. So in the South, when there'd be political rallies, they would pay to have pro wrestling there. Come for the wrestling, stay for the politics. As we know, in 1989, right, Linda McMahon, to get out of the New Jersey Athletic Commission, attempting that, although it didn't actually happen for 9 more years, announced, of course, that pro wrestling is fake. But she actually stood before the committee in 1987 in Pennsylvania. Linda McMahon is the one that initiated the SmackDown Your Vote campaign. There was 150,000 voters registered the first year. Of course, she accompanied The Rock to the Republican convention. In 2004, she became a trustee of Sacred Heart University. The school president cited her business acumen as credentials, and the university created a speaker series in her name. Connecticut Governor Jody Rell nominated McMahon for a seat on the Connecticut State Board of Education. Following a donation, Rell emphasized Linda's business acumen and skills in workforce development, serving a year in the role. Later, the university's student common area bore Linda's name. In 2009, McMahon's bought real estate at the Trump Park Towers. In the same year, of course, Linda resigned from WWE to run for the first time for Senate in Connecticut. Interestingly, she established relationships in politics by donating to both Republicans and Democrats. At one point, she was called the liberal wrestling promoter. Following her losses, she became a major benefactor of Republicans. Dr. Gary Rose called it her third act and said she is definitely going to be a player in the Republican Party. She tasted politics and she's interested in having a voice. She began writing a series of op-eds focused on women's leadership and small business. In one article she wrote, there is a question as to when more government becomes too much government. She also said, what if we sought to shift the national conversation from our disagreements to shared beliefs that unite us as Americans? Of course, in 2015, Donald Trump was a dark horse candidate to become the Republican nominee, and Linda was outspoken. He's not helping to put women in the best light. I realize he punches hard when he punches back, but that's just over the top. She called his comments deplorable and objectionable. She gave early support to Chris Christie. As Trump's candidacy grew, so did Linda's support of him. She now found him capable of being commander-in-chief and that he was just a vessel of people's frustrations. Trump removes chaos, brings order, puts jobs in America first. He supports women. like his daughter Ivanka. On Trump's 2016 election win, McMahon was considered for Secretary of Commerce and an ambassadorship. Later on, of course, she would run the SBA. She was then became, after she left the SBA, she oversaw a PAC to raise money for Trump, and she stayed in PACs up until his election, where she served in his transition team. And of course, on March 3rd, fully assumed the role of Secretary of Education.
Nice. Well said. Well put. You look going a little TrumpMania style, Linda. I love that. So, just as far as like turnout, everything was good. What you guys were expecting, everything was nice and sweet.
Yeah, everything went well. Interestingly, there was a interest in terms of streaming the event. I didn't set it up like that, but upstate, University of Buffalo, some members of their student body leadership or whatever, they were very interested in the event. So I said, well, if it goes well, maybe there's a way to take it on the road, go upstate. Buffalo, I've never actually been to upstate New York. I've only been as far as Saratoga Springs, in that area, but not the Chris Harrington, Brett Lauderdale, WrestleMap, WrestleTix. Actually, I'm not sure what WrestleTix is, but WrestleMap area where we have so many. Brandon Thurston, where we have so many connections to pro wrestling. So maybe there is something that can be done in Buffalo.
Nice. All right. I like the sound of that. Now, speaking of following maybe the trend there and heading up to Buffalo, what is this following the trend? What are you wanting to follow here?
Yeah, so I just sort of like a little bit of wisdom in pro wrestling. We're often, and I think this relates to today's news cycle. I mean, like modern times, of people following like the extremes and things being like the best, amazing, or like terrible, right? So like if AEW does a poor house, people are like, they're dead, they're done, whatever it may be. And if they do one strong premium event or pay-per-view, people are like, look at this number, it's comparable to when WWE had Raw there and so on. So people are really looking at the AEW Revolution, which I think did about 11,000 people for the event, which is great for them. But you do have to look at it without getting too hopped up. You can celebrate it, certainly. Why not? But like if you're like, as an indicator of business, you can't just look at it like for a one-off thing. You have to look sort of across the board. And of course, for WWE and AEW, this is well covered by WrestleTix and then analyzed further by WrestleNomics. And of course, putting ourselves out there, we basically cover this in a different way in terms of like the semi-national or national pro wrestling scene, as much information as we have. And obviously, if you're listening, you're well aware of that.
So, as far as comparing the business, I mean, we're talking uh, some basically U.S. television, digital, international distribution, live events, merchandising, social media, press coverage, talent, followers, buzz, places in the market, future prospects. Let's talk NWA, MLW, and a little bit of wow, a little bit of whoa.
Yeah, and as I was thinking about it today, I just added it to the notes right now, sort of like in terms of ownership. So, and this was like well aligned because we had a call for questions, and one of our loyal listeners actually suggested something to this effect of learning more about their businesses, especially NWA and MLW, as in regards to their distribution models and so on. So NWA and MLW are more similar, I would say, in terms of the way that they do business, right? Like they have ticketed events regularly, both about once a month for premium events, thereabouts. They have some form of distribution. They have some talents under contract and so on. But let's look at all them together. So U.S. television. So WoW is in really a unique and strong position in that it's really their current business model, as far as I understand it, produce television that's inexpensive for syndication. The traditional syndication model is, not saying I know how they do things, but traditional syndication model is that no money exchanges hands between the distributor and the content producer and the station. It's more that you get ad time to sell. So I think they remain in 100% of U.S. markets. We haven't heard their numbers in a while. WrestleNomics, I guess, doesn't get them anymore through whatever connections that they had in that regard. But it had been doing in the low several hundred thousands, like 200,000 to 400,000 a week. So they only have done television tapings like every 6 months, or maybe like almost like once a year. In that if they have multiple days, they could cover things, so you keep the cost lower. We've seen the postings for sort of what talents earn, and especially for the inexperienced or new trainees, that's a lower number. So, it's basically what you can make up on the ads, and doing the numbers that they do. It could possibly put them into a profitable position there. So uniquely, they have the strongest television in that regard. MLW has been in a really, I know it sounds like a little bit funny for people, like a pretty good position with beIN Sports for a number of years, meaning that it's a television station that had been a bigger deal, like in the Middle East and so on, that has an offshoot here in the U.S. When they had some semi-high profile soccer or football leagues, it was decently distributed. As they lost that, they lost a lot of distribution as well. So this is a station that does around 2,000 viewers in primetime average. Pro wrestling tends to do better than the primetime average. But that's where they are as a station. But it's always been reported that it's a money exchanging hands between beIN Sports to MLW. And beIN Sports also has, I think it's called Extra, where they have their Digi Network. So they have MLW on there. So it's hard to gauge something lower profile than only the biggest stations, which have made a lot of gains. Interestingly, Sinclair stations are the ones that have grown a lot, like Charge, Comet, TBD has been renamed, but those are doing quite well, actually. So that's MLW in terms of U.S. television. NWA has talked about television, has at times said that they had a couple television deals. For some generations and some people, they consider any sort of form of distribution television, but NWA has no television distribution to speak of. Excuse me, outside of, they have these territories that may have, or they do, let's say like World League Wrestling, as we've talked about in the past, they have a number of syndicated lower profile stations and so on, but I don't think the NWA considers that like their television. So I don't know if we have to determine a winner with each of these or whatever it may be, but that might be helpful. So if you were going to give it to someone, it would be WoW. Oh, and one thing that I nearly forgot about, and I did confirm recently that it's still going on, WoW does air on Vice, I think once a week this point at like midnight. So maybe after they've run like a number of like Dark Side of the Rings, then WoW airs. So that's just gravy potentially for them. So Digital. So the NWA, which of course had been on, what was it, on Peacock? No, sorry, on the uh, CW, right? So as a digital thing, and then when NXT came, it was sort of like, okay, it's clear that this won't work out, and it didn't. Um, and then they said they were going to be on X sort of for 5 weeks, and then it continued and so on. So it's unclear whether there's like a special relationship with X in that there's money or incentives or advertising changing hands from X to NWA if they meet certain incentives, or just a base and then incentive money. But that's how they're being distributed. MLW uniquely sort of like bounced around for a while, but they've pretty much settled on YouTube. Even I think all of their content is now just straight on YouTube. I don't know if you need to subscribe or there's any tiers anymore or anything like that, but that's in terms of the US, how they distribute. WoW has a fast channel now, and I'm not sure in terms of their weekly programming how they distribute it, but in terms of like growth and distribution and so on, I think like a fast channel is unique unto itself, so it's like hard to compare to the others, but I would probably give it to WoW on that side. What do you think about that, John, with the digital distribution? Is anyone winning, like, or they're all just sort of like apples and oranges?
It is, I think, probably more apples and oranges. It is hard to kind of decipher and figure out because they're all so much different, and where they're kind of seen, and their models are very different. I think we almost have to figure out who's making the most money as far as maybe live attendance or something. But even that's hard to do because WoW is kind of more of like TV taping, and yeah, it is weird to figure it out. Hopefully, everybody's doing well though and making money. I'm hoping that the all the top, what is it, the rising tide rises all ships. Hopefully that happens with WWE and bringing everybody up with them.
Yeah, it seems like for different degrees and investment, these three companies are not like in a precarious position, although sometimes it's hard to tell like where is their place in the market. So in terms of international distribution, NWA just, they just if you go to X, I assume, you could do it in Turkey, you could do it in Qatar, or as long as it's not a country where certain content is restricted, excuse me, you can watch the NWA, so that's not like necessarily international distribution. MLW has been pretty good with this. They have their content, what is it, in the UK, Wata fight, like that's crossover to Africa and the Middle East. I think there's a special station in Poland, that sort of thing. WoW had announced distribution in a few different countries at points. They don't talk about it much, and it's unclear, so that's like a little bit inconclusive. So just because MLW has been doing it consistently and the stations are known, I would give that to MLW. Live events. So at the moment, this is not really a WoW thing, that there are ticketed elements to their tapings. They have done like at conventions and so on, like special matches, but I don't think that's been ticketed. There was a show, what was it, in around September or late August in Vegas, that was like a one-off, but they're not really like a live events company. So NWA and MLW are more comparable, in fact, like very similar. So I think about like the high profile NWA events, which they brand, and then probably just comparing it to MLW, their monthly events. So here, MLW is a clear winner. They have basically found a way to have demand for their events on a monthly basis. And they're picking the right size venues now and all that. Merchandising, wow, they have it, and there's a way you can buy the t-shirts and so on, but I don't know if that's like as much of a thing. NWA and MLW, like, yeah, I mean, they produce stuff and it's out there and so on. The MLW stuff, the challenge when they had the toys was uh, that the talents weren't there by the time they made the toys, but having toys made by like a company is probably an advantage. So I'm just going to give that to MLW. Social media wows is really like nothing to wow about. It's there. Like, it doesn't really travel as far as I've noticed. NWA seems to get more buzz in my feed than MLW. What do you see, John?
It does seem like, for me too, NWA is definitely talked about more, or maybe somebody's reposting more, or maybe getting more videos put out there. But yeah, I would say NWA over MLW for my social media feed and like my algorithm, whatever you want to call it. I'm getting more NWA.
Great. So the press coverage is interesting because WoWs, although they will distribute to wrestling luminaries and persons of note, as you know, John, in terms of updating, what's the latest press release, and what's a summation of the show, and maybe you could watch a clip or preview, whatever. But they don't really do press with the pro wrestling media that I've seen, to date. It's really like they seek out, like, okay, we signed this person from Paola. Sorry, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but like somebody from like a reality show. So, Entertainment Weekly, or if that's a thing, whomever will like cover it. So it's like very mainstream, but not like, it doesn't really travel anywhere, I guess, like in pro wrestling circles. Maybe that helps their syndicated rating. It's sort of like a different universe, but that's their thing. NWA benefits well from like Billy Corgan. Like, it's basically Billy Corgan that's always interviewed, like in the larger media, and either it's directly about the NWA or he's manages to like slip it in there. So there's that like consistency. And they do on the ground promotion in terms of events, so that's probably even more impactful. MLW, actually, Court Bauer has, I had reached out to him recently for something else, and he said he doesn't really do media right now. So that's not a potentially a direct pursuit of them. I'm sure that I think they do have, right, like a PR representation. So certain talents would do the media. Not saying that they don't do it, but I would give this one to NWA, even though WoW like gets press more. So with talent, certainly very talented women pass through WoW from time to time, but mostly it's sort of like a training ground for their unique focus. MLW, and I think we'll talk about this later, sort of like talents cycle through there, but some of their top talent like is quite strong. NWA, sort of I don't know if they're like up and comers anymore, like Carino and Morton. I mean, Morton is young, right? Like, he's in his early 20s. He just graduated college maybe in the last year. But Colby Carino certainly has been around a while, but they have some, I mean, many talented people, but some talents that could really like travel other places if the conditions and timing is right. Maybe like I would say a slight edge to MLW. Slight edge, MLW, and then followed by the NWA. Followers buzz, I guess that sort of connects like with the social media and so on. I don't have like the hard numbers. Maybe I should. But I would say I would say like maybe a slight edge for NWA over MLW. A place in the market. So WoW is clear, like in terms of they have like a unique niche. I'm not like obviously it has been sustainable for the last three seasons of programming. Each year you see a renewal, it kind of indicates that it's sustainable. I think for MLW, it's sort of, they call it like fusion or whatever it be. It's kind of like a mishmash, and I'm not sure where they are in the market. NWA used to have their thing, in terms of like that retro feel, which carried well, especially in the beginning of Billy Corgan's run, but now they don't have that. And it just feels more like they focus, maybe less so recently, but they focus on like controversial talent and so on. So I would give that to WoW. I say that future prospects sort of like feels like the same as place in the market now that I'm thinking about it. And ownership. So, wealthy people aren't necessarily going to look to give all their money away or blow it on a wrestling promotion. Sometimes you'll see that, like, and much respect to this guy. I'd love to have him on the podcast. I'm not sure if he talks about it anymore, but the guy that won the Powerball and then started Wrestlelicious, and then he blew it all. Unfortunately, yeah, it seemed like he was taken advantage of by the business. I wonder who owns those tapes now. But in terms of ownership strength, so MLW is like a conglomerate of investors, sort of originally. Obviously, Court Bauer helms that. I have no idea what his finances are personally, but I don't think he's sort of like a ultra wealthy celebrity or anything like that, as compared to Genie Bus, who sets a budget, I assume, with this, working with David McLean and that sort of thing. And obviously Billy Corgan is wealthy too. So it's sort of like, I feel like Corgan is willing to invest more, a percentage of his money than Genie Bus, even though maybe she is wealthier. I'm just not sure. So I would give this to the NWA. So even though I said it wasn't a competition, now I'm curious. So I'm just going to quickly add this up, which makes for great, great audio. But that's 3 for WoW. Let's see. So about 4 for MLW, and 3 or 4, about 4 for NWA, and we have like slight edge here and that. So I think the jury is still out. It's still again, especially WoW is in its own lane, and I think MLW, I would give it just because they deliver more on the live events, and to me that's a big test, and they have television. So I would give it to MLW over the NWA.
Close call, though. Very, very close. Good rundown.
Yeah, it was a
Lot of good stuff.
fun way to look at it. I know that we've sort of like done comparisons and like thematic weeks, but never in that way.
Yeah, never broke it down like that. Now, as far as AEW is concerned, I know we don't talk too much about them on the show. Periodically, depends time to time. What's going on with them and some international TV rights?
Yes, so I thought this was just like insightful, not just because of AEW, which obviously is interesting in itself, but Brandon Thurston had sort of a full, amazing business deep dive into AEW. At certain points, it's a little bit unclear as to like, is this his projection based on like dissecting certain things, or like he has the specific numbers? I think it depends on what it is, but he's very specific about the television elements. So I'm assuming that he has the numbers. Of course, I should have probably confirmed that with him, which I can reach him busy week. So hopefully we'll catch up on this, or I'll triple read the report. But either way, I think this is insightful, because when we hear about promotions, especially the type that we're talking about, sort of like what it means to be in certain platforms, and obviously, when it's not AEW, it's going to be like a tiny fraction, or if not tiny, like a fraction of this. Let's say like right, okay, so like Eurosport India, AEW gets $3 million, and that represents 3% of their media. So what does uh, New Japan get on there, or TNA on there when they've aired? I don't, like it's hard to tell, but it's interesting to see. So like obviously US market, 90% of their revenue for media comes from there. The UK is almost, ITV is almost 4%. Eurosport, so that's they're getting $3 million from India, 3%. Bell Media in Canada, 860,000. Fight. So this is really interesting, because when we see like promotion, like this is a huge difference, and you can see this with both Fight and DAZN. Like when you think about it, you're like, okay, what's the difference between like streaming and like traditional television and media? It's apparently a huge difference, because both Fight and DAZN each have like their own territories and so on, right? That they distribute, and at times TNA has a similar way of distributing to some countries too, and it's quite low for covering many territories. So Fight 375,000, DAZN 250,000. So in Germany alone, TNT series, so I'm assuming that that's also like TNT, Warner Brothers Discovery. In Germany, 300,000. Toonami in France, 300. ESPN in Oceania are, I'm always confused. Is that the continent, or is Australia the continent? 300,000. Sky in Italy, 200,000. VIX in Latin America, 150. TNT Africa, so sub-Saharan Africa, so that certainly is the TNT, sort of affiliated with Warner Brothers, 150,000. Premier Sports in the Philippines, 100,000, and isn't talked about that much. AEW distributes to Japan through New Japan World, which is listed as $0.
Interesting. Now, switching gears here, let's talk a little WWE. Let's talk about WWE ID. What is the latest going on? Because I saw a very interesting post by WWE ID.
Yeah, a lot of us are not sure what is going on there, and assuming this is Sapolsky, maybe he has someone else that is in a position now on X to to tweet on his behalf, or whatever it may be. But um, it sort of feels not desperate, but like WWID, like it would feel like this is like a premium thing, right? Like once you ascend to WWID, WWE will then sort of like help place you, right? We talked about like controlling the market and so on, but things are still shaking out. So they had tweeted a reminder to all independent wrestling promotions: you can book all WWE ID talent in your promotion. This includes talent who are getting exposure on Evolve. Contact talent individually for booking information. So it's still very decentralized. And then they were just like tweeting out like GCW. That's it. They didn't say anything. And another promotion as well. And people like start speculating, or aren't sure what it's all about. So again, whatever WWE ID is today, if this is determined to last and it makes sense, I think it'll be very different a year from now or 18 months from now.
How about heels have eyes? What's going on? I love talking about them on this show. What are they up to?
Yeah, so I don't know if South by Southwest is as cool as it used to be, but a lot going on there still. So they've sold out their Heels Have Eyes 5 event at South by Southwest, except people that have like basically like South by Southwest super tickets, they could just get it. They could just come in to the event. So I don't know like how they determine that, and like the people that have bought tickets individual, if they come in first, and then if there's space or anything like that. So not a headache we have to worry about too much. But and then just looking at the Heels High Fives at in the Pro Concert Theater at the Palms, Game Changer Wrestling, they have 665 tickets distributed thus far. I think we'll hold on the full collective weekend till we're kind of like very close, or probably very close, and then look at final numbers following that, just because there's so many shows.
Yeah, you got a ton of shows. Speaking of that, why don't we get right into GC Dub? What's the latest with GCW?
So they're coming to Portland, the Hawthorne Theater, and love the graphic, the Trailblazers. John, to me, my favorite time of like NWA was with people like Clyde the Glide. Obviously people like the Dream Team, basically early 90s. That was just like the breakout superstars. People talk about like, why isn't the NWA as popular as it needs to be? You need that star power. It's true in pro wrestling and sports as well. So just briefly looking at their upcoming schedule, and again we'll leave out the collective, but pre-collective, Atlantic City. So weather is looking better, so maybe there'll be an uptick in tickets. Last time I checked, it looked quiet. March 15th and 16th. Then in Chicago at the end of March, followed by Sauget, Illinois. Then April 6th in Chester, Pennsylvania. The Philly special. Brett really considers it just Philly. It's kind of, he thinks about it as one in the same. Following the collective, May 3rd, back to LA. Joppa, Maryland on May 17th. Little Rock on June 20th. Dallas on July 11th. Coney Island show on July 19th. Bloodsport in London on September 28th, and Anchorage, Alaska on October 4th.
How about little ML Dub? What's the latest with MLW?
So MLW reportedly set to make several releases. So I think this came originally from from the Wrestling Observer. To me, like as we talked about with the action figures, like how infrequently that they run, you really need like 3 to 5 names so you can market them and have them on your materials and merchandise them and so on. I think basically, although it's inconvenient, I think basically for everyone else, you just need bout agreements, right? You say, okay, we have these coming shows over the next 3 months. Can you commit to those 3? And then you sort of go from there. It just doesn't make sense to have a number of talents under contract for MLW right now, even with the settlement money. I think they're still being careful. But their show in Commerce, California, I haven't counted the map, but it's a fair amount of tickets distributed. That's looking really good. People like the Battle Riot. To me, it seems more like a schmaz, like just too much going on, even more than like World War III from WCW. But that is April 5th. Then in May, Azteca Lucha and Cicero. Then in June, New York City. And then we'll find out what they do in July and August. But then North Richmond Hills on September 13th, my birthday.
Nice. Love that. What about TNA? What's going on with TNA Wrestling?
I think the most interesting thing is just waiting for those El Paso numbers. Hopefully we get them. Everyone keeps talking about largest 2-day, largest
Yeah.
1 day in 10 years. What will this ultimately be? That's a real curiosity. So March 14th and 15th, on March 28th and 29th in St. Joseph, Missouri. On April 17th, of course, in Vegas around WrestleMania weekend events. On the 27th, Rebellion in LA. Again, those it's hard to tell with the ticket map how tickets are doing. On May 1st and 2nd in Irvine, California, on May 23rd and 24th in Brampton, Ontario, where, of course, Len Asper's newly purchased minor league basketball team plays, as we talked about extensively. And as we're recording this, no further updates yet on Slammiversary. So the following week we'll catch up on that. But it tended to be at a clip of like 75 to 100 tickets a week. So we'll see as it's still a ways out as that gets closer if that picks up.
What about the NWA and Crockett Cup and what they got going on?
Yeah, so as we talked about Natty Neidhart, Crockett Cup at the 2300 Arena, kind of been quiet for the pro wrestling that we talk about generally. I'm not sure if Battleground has been running there recently. I haven't been keeping track of that, but looks like they've got their first row out the door and then a little dots here and there in terms of further tickets on May 17th. But one to watch is the, of course, Hard Time Show, Dothan Civic Center Arena. I just love this old time venue. It looks like sales have picked up well, especially following the local media that we talked about last time. So curious to see how this does as a final number.
And then finally, your favorite topic of all time, Here and There, the return of Here and There.
Yes, I did that for you, John. I know the enthusiasm for the here and there.
Yeah.
ACW presents Aftershock, so of course the Poughkeepsie venue. I'm not sure where they were doing, at the time, last time, and so on, but 387 tickets distributed, 10 tickets in the last 7 days, so slow. But it's not till May 17th, and sort of it's a local thing, so you would see, I'd imagine, a lot more push at that time. And Scenic City Rumble, SCI tournament, and so on. Thanks to the hundreds of fans that came out to East Middle School, I guess, to help us raise thousands of dollars. SCI tournament on July 18th and 19th. And I know for sure friends of the broader PW Ponderings community.
Love that. As far as us and this week and the show, let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the place. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. How about you, Lavie?
As my newly updated subheader here, if you're watching on YouTube, the business of the business on LinkedIn. We're well over 100 members. We want to continue to keep growing. Follow me on X at Lavie Marg and support TrumpMania. As many people buy it, Amazon will print the books or get you the digital or audio copy. So get whatever you like. I really enjoyed listening on audio.
I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this week. See you right here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.